Good morning and welcome. Please take your seats. We encourage you to wear a mask and remain socially distanced. The program will begin in a few minutes. Good morning and welcome. The program is about to begin. Please silence your cell phones. At the end of the program, you'll be asked to use your phone to participate in the question and answer session, so keep them handy, just on silent. Now, on to the program.
All right, well, welcome back to civilization. Wow. The voice of God is spoken. We're ready to go. I'm Todd Laporte, the CEO of Honor Health, and I'm proud to welcome you to this Blue Zone Community Leadership Kickoff event. Thank you for being here with us today. Most of you know Honor Health and our long-standing history of serving the community of Scottsdale and now even surrounding communities. We are proud to work alongside the leaders of this great city and value our shared commitment to ensuring that Scottsdale remains a great place to work, to live, and to play. I want to especially thank Mayor Ortega for joining us today and acknowledge the other elected officials in attendance here. Vice Mayor Tammy Caputi, Council Members Tom Durham, Benny Janik, Kathy Littlefield, and Linda Milhaven. This Blue Zone Community Leadership event underscores Honor Health's ongoing commitment to Scottsdale and its leaders. We understand that our community needs more than just great high-quality health care to be truly healthy. This is why Honor Health agreed to anchor this event and perform the first Blue Zones assessment in Arizona. You may already be aware of Blue Zones backed by research of the original Blue Zones, which are longevity hotspots where people thrive into their hundreds. Blue Zones is a community-wide well-being improvement initiative designed to make healthy choices easier. They do this by encouraging sustainable changes to the environment in which people live, work, and play. This kickoff event is the first step in the journey for Scottsdale to become a Blue Zones community. Honor Health is grateful to be on the journey with the city, the Blue Zones organization, and all of you, civic, business, and community leaders, to identify and validate the key characteristics necessary to bring a Blue Zones transformation to Scottsdale. Each of you have an important role here today. You represent a village, the village of community groups and policy leaders that are needed to ensure that this work is a success. Blue Zones communities are dependent on the public and private sector leaders working together on a shared commitment to improving health and well-being. Honor Health is steadfast in our commitment to go beyond the traditional expectations of a healthcare system, furthering our mission to improve the health and well-being of those we serve. We often say we are not just a hospital system anymore, and so many services outside pure medical care as service to our neighborhood is part of who we are. Food bank, adult daycare, military training, and so much more. The journey is also very personal to me, as I know firsthand the importance of health and the Power 9 that you will learn more about today. I had a heart attack 7 years ago, which inspired a renewed focus on my personal health and connected me to Dan Buettner's book and principles espoused in the Blue Zone's 9 Lessons for Living Longer. I look forward to working with each of you and the joy that will come from impacting our community and the people we are close to. So now I would like to introduce Scottsdale Mayor David Ortega to share a few words.
Well, thank you and good morning. I can honestly say that Todd Laporte is my new best friend. Over the last 20 months, of course, we've been in a pandemic and relied on Honor Health, almost like we were in an emergency room. However, we are emerging and we are rejuvenated. So Scottsdale has 4 attributes. First, we are a beautiful, water-conscious city in the Sonoran Desert. We're very clean and we're very well planned. We're safe in a secure business environment, and we are primarily interested in community health and personal wellness. Honor Health has always been the leading caregiver in Scottsdale, and today the City of Scottsdale is pleased to join the Blue Zones and Honor Health teams as we explore community health holistically. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Ortega. I am the mayor of Scottsdale, but I'm also an architect. I came to Scottsdale as a young man, apprentice architect, and knew no one. And over time, married, raised a family. Our 2 children were born at an Honor Health hospital just 1 block away. And through that period, up to today, I will say that Scottsdale shaped me, and in turn, as an architect, I shaped Scottsdale. I find the biggest lesson is that the built environment and the natural environment and our organic selves are inseparable. As we look at our city, I want to, I know that the Blue Zones team has just arrived yesterday and explored our city. There are over 300 participants citywide in this exploration as we move forward with their expertise. I know that along the way you will find that Scottsdale is a very unique community and a very diverse community, and I hope that you will take some time to enjoy the McDowell Sonoran Preserve, and of course in these whereabouts in our Old Town we have many exquisite restaurants. We are a thriving destination. We're known regionally, nationally, and internationally. The Scottsdale Airport was named the 4th busiest airport for business travel, the 4th busiest in the world. We are a touch point for business leaders who come here for our many attractions, but also to make strong business decisions related to the wellness of their companies, and of course our community as a whole. We are a destination whether it's just for a day trip, a vacation stay, or for the rest of your life. And that's why Scottsdale is so captivating. I run into people all the time who tell me just that. They got a preview of Scottsdale years ago, and they made a choice to reside here. We are a most livable city. We have a moniker that says also we are the westmost western town, and I refer to that motto meaning that, you know, we have grit. We have resilience, we are doers, and we are a positive community. Most of our, as it turns out, we are, I think, the 92nd largest city by population, but we are the 5th largest city by area. So that is an interesting statistic. We also have a large population over 55, and we always have to look at the health aspects and the nutritional values that we will place on our priorities. Our council was recognized, and I want, as most of you are aware, we did develop a general plan, which is our 5 and 10-year horizon as a community, and involving transportation, the environment, sustainability, and all the other factors, including water conservation. So it's a pleasure to be here today. And as you know, 2 years ago, there were many uncertainties. In many ways, we felt vulnerable, and the vulnerability reached everywhere in our own physical health, business health, and as a city. We are an organism as a city, and as such, I find that we know that Honor Health certainly is at the center of this conversation, and I look forward to all of the exploration that Blue Zones brings today. I also want to thank everyone for being here, and as we learn today and go forward, let's engage more of our peers in every sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Ortega. I love that you were an architect by background, because as you guys will see, Blue Zones is all about choice, specifically the architecture of choice, which we think is one of the biggest lessons we learned in the Blue Zones. And thank you, Todd, our 1-year Zoom anniversary, finally in person. About a year ago, we started exploring this work. And above all, thank you for your human capital. Michelle and Kara and Chris from Honor Health and Rachel and Cindy from the city, instrumental. This has been months of planning, everybody, so thank you for coming, and thank you to you all for carving 2 hours out of your Zoom schedules. I like to think it's not too big of an ask to get 2 hours less screen time and come in person and see a little National Geographic eye candy with us today. I'm Dan Buettner, Jr. As you can see, I'm not Dan Buettner, Sr. Otherwise, this Blue Zone thing works really well. I'm vice president of Blue Zones Project. I was a firefighter for 10 years, so I know what it's like to be on the front lines, as many of the people from Honor Health in the city are. I work with a great national team. Some of them are here today and this week. Some of them will be here over the next few months. And what we do is we partner with communities who have strategy work already in play around well-being, around economic development, about workforce, around tourism, and then explore, pressure test what Blue Zones does and the science of well-being and the economics that flow from it, how we can accelerate and elevate some of that work. So this week, there's going to be bilateral show and tell. You heard Mayor Ortega mention about 200-300 people, including yourselves, are participating over the next 3 days. We're going to listen, we're going to learn, we're going to get to know Scottsdale as much as we can over a 3-day period of time. And then we are also going to do some showing and telling as well, talking about the value proposition, the ROI that comes from well-being, what's this behavior science that drives it, and how do you export things like the Power 9, which you're going to learn about here to Scottsdale. Today, we're going to have some fun. Today is the kickoff. Today is an opportunity for you all to show a little reciprocity to Todd and Mayor and others who have invited Blue Zones in to listen. I hope you guys bring your critical thought. We have a Q&A at the end. Michelle Pabis will come up. I have a couple of my operating partners at Blue Zones. We're going to take up these stools, and we'll hope you'll pressure test, you'll inform, and you'll comment and ask your questions on if this is a good fit for Scottsdale. I've got some eye candy for you guys. I've got some Danny jokes for you guys. Hopefully you like them. Take you to the world's longest lived cultures, get their lessons you can take into your life. Take you to some of the communities over the last 12 years that have taken these lessons and started leading the demonstration here at home. To start, and I'm wondering if we can dim these lights a little bit, because I can't see anybody. I guess I could stand a little bit here. I thought we'd do a little icebreaker. Is everybody get enough coffee to do an icebreaker? Okay, there you go. Nothing like the Blue Zones team to fill the void. All right, so you guys have 2 jobs on this icebreaker. It's a fun icebreaker. It's called measuring your life expectancy. So you guys have 2 jobs in this icebreaker. Job number 1 is I'm going to ask 8 questions, and you have to raise your hand if the question that I ask applies to you in the affirmative. And then the second job you have, and this is the hard one, is you have to remember at the end of the 8 questions how many times you rose your hand. Sound good? Good, okay. So in partnership with the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, they devised 8 questions that can get us within a margin of error of about 15% of how long we should live, our life expectancy. It doesn't account for particularly risky behaviors like if you sneak off into the desert and drink ayahuasca for weeks at a time. It doesn't account for that. This is lifestyle that we're talking about today. All right, here we go. Question number 1, raise your hand if you get at least 7 hours of sleep 5 nights a week. Wow, terrific. Must not be a whole lot of Honor Health nurses in the room. That's really good. That's really good. Question number 2, raise your hand if you move for 45 minutes per day. You get 45, outstanding. I would expect that with all the given natural amenities you guys have here in the background of Scottsdale. Raise your hand if you get 3 honest servings of veggies every single day, and French fries and ketchup do not count. All right, we're at 70% there. Question number 4, raise your hand if you have abstained over the last 5 years from unprotected sex with strangers. Oh, own it. Own it. I see you guys hiding over there. Oh, yeah, there it is. It's a serious question. I asked that question in Miami last spring, and after a long pause, a guy broke the silence by asking if I meant this week. Swear to God. Question number 5, raise your hand if you have at least 3 good friends and you can have a meaningful conversation with them. You can call them on a bad day and they'll answer. And 3, you actually like them. Okay, a well-connected group. That's phenomenal. You wouldn't believe how many Americans pre-pandemic and especially post-pandemic are struggling with isolation and loneliness. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. Question number 6, raise your hand if you belong to a faith-based community and you show up 4 times a month. All right, get a little spirit of momentum here. Question number 7, raise your hand if you've not smoked in the last 5 years. God bless you, terrific. And then finally, this is the last question, and this is the most important question, according to Paul Costas, who runs the National Institutes of Aging in Washington, D.C. Raise your hand if you desire and believe you have the health to reach a healthy age 90. You desire and you believe you can get there healthy. Fantastic. You wouldn't believe how many people I asked that question to, and they're not sure. or they've made up their mind that they don't want to get there. The reason that question is so important, according to Paul Costas, it's overly weighted compared to the other questions, is you know 3 things that your doctor, your physician, doesn't know. You know how you feel today, you know how you've lived, and you know how you're probably going to live going forward. So having that understanding of and desire and intention is actually one of the biggest determinants of whether or not you'll reach a healthy age 90. All right, let's see how we did. I assume you guys remember how many times you rose your hand. If you rose your hand twice and you're a man, 68 years of life expectancy, woman 72. If you rose your hand 4 times and you're a man, 77 years of life expectancy, woman 81. And if you rose your hand 6 times and you're a man, in this country you should live to 88 years, woman 92 years. Did anybody raise their hand all 8 times? I got 2. Stand up. Round of applause right here. Three, I saw you. You can go to the Bloody Mary bar at the Patron Loco. You are excused from the rest of the exercise today. All right, so we do the exercise. We know that the average life expectancy for an American is 78 years, but we know the shelf life of the human body is about 90. So somewhere along the line, we're leaving 12 good years of life on the table. So the original premise, of Blue Zones, and that's my father right there, the smiling guy doing the hard research of National Geographic over happy hour, is if lifestyle and environment account for 80% of our life expectancy, genes are only 20%, then let's go out and find the fountain of youth. Let's go out and find places where people are really, really long time and see if we can distill that formula and bring it back home to our families, to our lives, and to our communities. And we did. We distilled it. It's called the Power 9, and you're going to learn a lot about that here in the next 35, 40 minutes. 20 years ago, my father partnered with National Geographic and the National Institutes of Health to go out and find that fountain of youth. Spoiler alert, they did not find it. Came up short on the fountain of youth. But they did find these 5 dots, 5 anomalies, 5 places that are exhibiting the best practice from our species on how to set up your social networks, your community, your policy, your built environment, your cultures, so that health ensues instead of something that you pursue. These places, people reach age 100 at 10x what we do here in America. They have a couple things that are absolute kickers. Kicker number 1 is they have a fraction of the rates of chronic disease. Alzheimer's, hip fractures, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, loneliness, depression. So they're living really long and they're living really good. Kicker number 2, 4 out of 5 of the dots on this map are at or below the poverty line. They don't have Honor Health. They don't have amazing assisted living or Walgreens. They've got those best practice that we're going to talk about today. And kicker number 3 is of the 300 centenarians that we interviewed. And the reason you're hearing from me today and not my father is because he's on assignment again for National Geographic at this very moment, continuing to advance the research, which is where his heart has always been. But of the 300 centenarians studied, not a single one pursued health, pursued longevity, and pursued happiness. It ensued. It was a byproduct of where they live. And I'm going to take you to all those places today. So an anthology of New York Times bestselling books, National Geographic cover stories, 3 more books under contract with Nat Geo, now owned by Disney. So this story and research is just going to continue, which has got tactical value for those of us that partner with communities on engaging employers and schools and stakeholders. Good news is you guys don't have to go out and buy any of these books because I'm going to tell you all the secrets right here, right now in the next half hour. It's more than just a story. When we went to the original expedition, we brought demographers, MDs, epidemiologists to validate and confirm that the story is backed by actual peer-reviewed data. So let's go. Our first blue zone is 180 kilometers off the island of Italy, off the country of Italy on the island of Sardinia. If you look at Italy, this is the little soccer ball that the Italian boot kicks. It is here that we have ground zero for the world's longest-lived men on the planet. In America, we get about 1 centenarian, 1 100-year-old for every 5,000 births. In that little blue dot in the highlands of Sardinia, they get 4 100-year-olds for every 1,000 births. So there's something incredibly special that's happening here. It's not the whole island. The island's got some interesting topography. It's got lowlands and it's got highlands. The anomaly is in the highlands. A cluster of about 14 villages, about 40,000 people live there. It's a culture that's largely incubated since the time of Christ. And this is where 104-year-olds are riding a motorcycle, chopping wood, and beating a guy, that's my father, by the way, in an arm wrestle. By the way, this video is taken at 7:30 a.m. after a tumbler of wine already. That's what you want. It's like George Carlin, for those of you who remember George Carlin. It's not just about adding more years to your life, but more life to your years. These centenarians were studied before Blue Zones got there. They were the subject of a University of Rome epidemiological longitudinal study in which they followed over 500 of these centenarian men from Sardinia. And they found 3 commonalities that these men had that they just all had in common. The first, interestingly enough, was barley consumption. These Sardinian highland men ate a lot of barley, which we thought was kind of interesting. Number 2 that these men had in common is that the guys with 5 or more daughters lived longer than the ones who didn't. And they don't know... How many do you have? You've got 4. Todd, geez. Yeah, God bless you. They don't know if it's because daughters stick around and take care of mom and dad, or if you could survive 5 adolescent daughters, nothing's going to take you out. But here's the third, and the third commonality that Blue Zones seized on was their profession. You heard me mention the topography difference on the island. Lowlands, highlands. Lowlands, really good for agriculture, really good for farming. And as a consequence, these men in the lowlands had a very busy planting season and a very sedentary growing season. The highlands are no good for farming. So their profession is they're sheep herders and goat herders. And what that means is that they get 5K of walking exercise every single day. They suffer a fraction of the hip fractures that they do on their Italian mainland counterparts. They get vitamin D from the sun. They're socializing. They're always out there with their friends, their sons, their grandsons. So our first Power 9 is move naturally. It's not about going to a gym. It's about moving naturally. Their diet, as you might imagine, has evolved to reflect the constant motion. So they've got certain things like this special type of bread that's made from durum wheat. It's enlivened with a bacteria called lactobacillus. The women inoculate the starter dough. And we had this bread tested. And what happens when you eat bread to your glycemic index? Skyrockets. This bread actually goes, your blood sugar goes down when you eat this bread. By the way, all the food that I'm going to share with you guys, recipes at bluezones.com for free. They do eat a little bit of dairy, although unlike here in America, in the Midwest where I'm from, it's not corn-fed cow's dairy, but rather grass-fed goat's dairy. It's got the perfect mix of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which is good for you. Pecorino cheese, a delicious substitute for Wisconsin cheddar, and a healthy substitute. You'll see plant slant. That's another one of the Power 9, plant slant. 95% plant-based diets. These men are chomping on barley and nuts all day long. They love their nuts. They also wrap it up with fava beans and greens. They do eat a little bit of animal protein, although unlike here in America, it's a condiment. So it's not the main course. It's usually about the size of a deck of cards, and they only eat it on celebratory events like Sunday. Good news for many Americans, they like their wine. They do a lot of happy hours, always with friends. Nothing like muddy boots to add terroir to your wine. This is a special kind of wine. It's called Cananao wine, and it's special because it's fermented differently than what we have here in America, because they keep the seeds and the skins of the grapes in the fermentation process, and that's where all the good stuff is. That's where all the antioxidants are. So this wine has literally got 3 times the amount of antioxidants as typical wine does. So it's literally a medicine, and it's a medicine they apply regularly. Just as important as their job is and what they consume is how they're treated. Social equity goes up. It doesn't peak at 20 when you're an Instagrammer or a TikToker. The older you get, the more you're revered in this community. Purpose. Purpose, purpose, purpose. This is a big power 9 for us. We know people who have purpose live 4 to 14 years longer than don't. So they don't ever retire. And I'll talk more about retirement a little bit later, being an American construct. But these men and women are given duties and jobs. The women possess the knowledge of the recipes. There's no recipe books. They pass it down to generation. Men understand the pests and the soil and the wind and the art of being a shepherd. They pass it down. They volunteer on city council. They volunteer on city foot patrols. So they're given a job. And finally, what we found in the Sardinia Blue Zone is something called the grandmother effect. This is coined by the World Health Organization. It's present in many amphibious mammals, including humans, and that is family units or households that have a grandparent present. The children suffer a fraction of the rate of childhood infirmity and death, have higher education rates, and guess what Blue Zone's discovered as a corollary? Guess who else benefits by being kept close to the family unit? That's right, grandma and grandpa. Our second Blue Zone's halfway across the planet on the archipelago of Okinawa, Japan. This is the land of the immortals. One of the themes you'll hear from me today, these are not homogeneous populations. These are heterogeneous populations. Okinawa, Japan's been intermarrying with the rest of the Pacific since the dawn of time. They've been invaded. They're called the land of the immortals. They've been invaded by the Japanese, by the Chinese, many, many times. And yet they have the longest lived women than anywhere else on the planet. These women got it going on. They got the longest disability-free life expectancy anywhere in the world. In America, and really around the world, we will spend 90% of our total our total life healthcare dollars in the last 5 years of our life. It's called the morbidity period. It's not a really great time to be around. You're sick, you're infirmed, and you're spending all this money on medical bills. In America, that morbidity period is extending from 5 years to 7 years. These women live really long, and their morbidity period is compressed to under a year. So they live really long, and then they die really fast, often in their sleep, often after sex, so I'm told, but I don't inquire. I mean, that's what you want, right? That's what you want. 7 good years longer, 5 times as many 100 years, 1/5 the rate of breast and colon cancer, 1/6 the rate of cardiovascular disease. Since the pandemic, last 2 years, what's been the #1 killer of our fellow Americans? Anybody? I heard depression. I heard opioids. It wasn't COVID. It wasn't COVID, yeah. Cardiovascular disease killed way more Americans than COVID over the last 2 years. #2 is preventable cancers, and #3 was COVID. So we got a couple endemics, and we can learn something from these Blue Zones. We see a culture of women that their lives revolve around their gardens. They take care of their gardens take care of us. Once again, we see the power 9 of move naturally. These girls are getting up and off the ground 20 times a day. They're doing squats 20 times a day. So it's not about going to the gym, going hard for an hour, and then being sedentary. It's setting up your home and your life so that you have move naturally opportunities. Some of the veggies they produce we recognize. Some of them are new to us. This is the Goya melon or the bitter melon. It's been shown to clean the blood and actually kill certain cancer-causing cells. It's delicious. They chop it up into chunks and they put it into their stir fry. Just as important as what they put in their mouth is they are masters of taking things out of their diet. So they have a 3,000-year-old Confucian adage called Hari Hachi Bu, which translated means stop when you're 80% full. So, and they have a couple other tactics that I'm going to share with you a little bit later. Ways to set up the invisible nudges to reduce consumption. So it's not just about having healthy food, but not overeating, giving your stomach a chance to let the brain know that we're full. So we talked about isolation. I asked that question during our little icebreaker. How many of you have 3 good friends? I told you that the average American had 3 best friends in 1970. We're down to 1.5 pre-pandemic. I'm scared to see what it is post-pandemic. I know that Honor Health, in partnership with the community, ran a survey of citizens of Scottsdale in the last year, and 25% of Scottsdale residents reporting rarely or never having somebody to turn to. 1 in 4 people in Scottsdale have no companionship, which is shocking from as an outsider from what I would expect from a community like Scottsdale. In Okinawa, that's a moot point. In Okinawa, they have a cultural institution called moai. Moai is something that's been happening there for centuries. When you're 4 or 5 years old, mom and dad bring you down to town square, and they put you in a group of 4 or 5 boys or 4 or 5 girls. That's your moai. And for the rest of your life, you travel through the journey of life together, and you guys are there for each other in thick and thin. It's a cultural institution, keeps people together. This moai, these gals, average age of 101 years old. They've been in a moai for 97 years, and they still get together every week, drink sake, argue about who that hot guy liked more in 1949. But what's amazing about this is if one of these gals doesn't show up for their weekly moai, the other gals put on their kimono, their little sandals, they shuffle down the street, they go check on her. When you're 101 years old and you live alone, if you fall, that could be game over. But they have a cultural institution, so they have the right tribe. Who can tell me the 2 most dangerous years in an American's life, statistically speaking? Anybody? Who said that? You've been cheating. That's right. You're 100% right. The year you're born, because of a statistical uptick in complications, and the year you retire. Americans die. A shocking number of Americans die within 6 months of retirement. Why is that? Is that because we pick up the ayahuasca habit out in the desert? No. It's because too many Americans work until this artificial punctuation in life called retirement, and then they kick back in the lazy boy and eat Cheetos, and they let atrophy take over. Atrophy of the mind takes over atrophy of the body, atrophy of the spirit, you're dead in 6 months. In 3 out of the 5 blue zones, the word retirement doesn't exist. Think about that. They don't have a word for retirement. It's just not a thing. Instead, it's purpose, right? They have vocabularies for purpose, and they can articulate it. Here, they call it ikigai, which means the reason I get out of the bed in the morning. This 104-year-old Kung Fu master, his ikigai is passing on the art of Kung Fu. This 98-year-old's ikigai is every morning this sprightly young guy puts on bamboo goggles and a swimsuit. He goes swimming, goes spearfishing, catches lunch that he brings to his great-grandkids for school. There's another guy who likes happy hour. And Kamada-san, 104 years old, her ikigai is her great-great-great-granddaughter. These 2 girls are separated in age by over 100 years. Asked her what it felt like to hold a descendant that's 3 generations removed, and her response was, like leaping into heaven. So then we had to find the American blue zones. My father's editor at Nat Geo said, this is great stuff. You got to bring it home to America. For a while, we thought we found it on the plains of Minnesota. But when you peel back the layers of the demographical onion, we found that all the young people just left, probably to come to Scottsdale. So it left an artificial data set. Instead, we found it not far from here, down the San Bernardino Highway in Loma Linda, California, where you get off the highway, and the first thing you see is a Del Taco and a Wiener Hut. And you've arrived at America's very own blue zones. What's going on here? Well, embedded in this community is over 100,000 Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists are a Christian denomination. They evangelize with health. They stick to each other predominantly in Loma Linda. They get their Bible straight from, they get their diet straight from the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, stanzas 24 through 28. All the trees that bear fruit, all the plants that bear seeds. They talk about legumes and nuts. Ostensibly missing is reference to animal protein. Once again, we weren't the first people to study this anomaly, these people. They were the subject of a longitudinal study by Harvard University where they followed 103 Seventh-day Adventists. It's called the Adventist Health Study, considered gold standard. And check this out. These are Americans who aren't living on some far-flung island in the Aegean Sea. These are Americans who drive past Del Taco in the checkout lane at Target. And look at their results. They're living longer than us, than their neighbors. Once again, we see a heterogeneous population, so it's not about the genes, it's about lifestyle and culture. They are not geographically isolated, but some of them can be a little bit socially isolated. They really like to stick to each other. They celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday instead of on Sunday, so it doesn't matter if the kids got baseball practice or if you need milk. They don't go do that on Saturday. That's their sanctuary and time, as they call it, and usually occasions a nature walk, the definition of which has evolved over the years, but the point remains. They get together, they have healthy potlucks. This is a community that gave us a centenarian, almost a centenary, 99-year-old guy by the name of Ellsworth Wareham. Ellsworth Wareham, Seventh-day Adventist, lives in Loma Linda, multi-millionaire. And while we were there filming, he happened to be building a fence. Now, this is a multi-millionaire guy who's coming up on 100 years old, and he got quoted $6,000 to save him the backbreaking labor of building his own fence. And he said, for $6,000, I'll do it myself. And sure enough, for 3 days in the Southern California heat, you guys know what that's like, he was out there, pushing a wheelbarrow, digging footings. And on the 4th day, he ends up in the OR. But that's not Ellsworth on the table. That's Ellsworth on the right, who at approaching 100, performed open heart surgery 4 times per month. This story got picked up by Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz, of course, as a doctor, was able to suit up, go into the OR, watch Ellsworth perform, came out, Dr. Oz ripped his mask off, said, "Oh my God, how'd you do it?" And Ellsworth said, "I don't hang out with old folks." Ed Rawlings, he's a cowboy, he's a licensed pilot. Another Seventh-day Adventist wakes up every morning, 98 years old, goes for a swim. Ed Rollins putting up rooster tails in the afternoon. That's where I come from. And then Marge Jeton, my father developed a very close relationship with Marge Jeton. I've been to 2 of the Blue Zones, but I actually haven't been to Loma Linda yet. But Marge Jeton, she's the only one of the 300-plus centenarians who actually exercises in a gym sense. She wakes up, she eats steel-cut oats, the kind you make on the stove, not the microwave kind, puts some dates in it, puts some soy milk in it, washes it down with a prune juice shooter. And then she gets on her way where she volunteers at 7 different organizations in her community. She likes to, I forgot that was up there. She's got a good sense of humor. She's got it. My dad asked her, "Marge, what does the body feel like at 104 years old?" And she thought, "Well, I'll tell you what, I felt a lot sexier at 102. So this got written up in the first National Geographic cover story. Like good researchers, we went and spent the money on discovering 2 more blue zones, Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica. If you reach age 50 here, you've got the highest likelihood than anywhere on the planet, including Scottsdale, of reaching age 100, and they spend 1/15 of what we do on healthcare. These people are not free from stress. This is below the poverty line. They worry about money, they worry about their kids. A lot of them work 7 days a week. They got real issues, but they got strategies to downshift, whether it's happy hours or naps or walks. They keep family close. I got to spend the day with Doña Panchita. She's one of the oldest centenarians, 106 years old, lives in a hut, no windows, dirt floors, citrus growing in the back, peppers growing in the front, completely by herself. We spent a couple days with her, and both days something really remarkable happened. About 25 villagers, ranging from little kids kicking soccer balls in the front to 80-year-olds, gathered both days. And at the end of the second day, we realized they were all descendants of Panchita. It was all her family. She was far from isolated. They all just mosey on over. They're all walking distance. So once again, keeping loved ones close. Mesopotamian diet, citrus, squash, beans, corn, staples, a lot of coffee, a lot of water is consumed. Don Bonifacio, 98 years old, working cowboy, likes to brag about his 69-year-old girlfriend, who he says is kind of hot, as he puts it. He wakes up, he goes out with his sons and his grandsons. They have machetes, and they clear shrub from nearby land. The land's worthless, but they have something to do. And then our final blue zones on our journey today is Ikaria, Greece, in the Aegean Sea. This place did not have ports up until World War II. I mean, totally isolated. Did not have ports until World War II. It has the purest form of the Mediterranean diet than anywhere else on the planet. Once again, we see a culture that revolves around their gardens. It's also a community where the built environment is not built for automobiles. So everywhere occasions a walk, and it's impossible to walk anywhere without bumping into a friend, often a friend who's trying to coax you into coming in for a glass of wine. Tony Butin, my uncle there, he's one of the Blue Zone's original expedition members. This picture was taken at 2 a.m. at a local wedding where he's partying with a 98-year-old and a 92-year-old at 2 a.m. The whole village was there. And then this is where we met Stamaitis Moriartis. This is the last centenarian I'm going to introduce you guys to today. Stamaitis Moriartis, World War II veteran from Icaria, got deployed in theater in Italy, got hit by a mortar round, mangled his arm, couldn't get health care, got on a frigate to America, landed in Detroit, got the care, met a good Greek-American gal. They got married, had some sons, bought a Chevy, bought a house in the suburbs of Detroit. He was an industrious guy, hardworking guy, got success as a painter. And then in the 70s, in the late 70s, early 80s, one day he couldn't walk up the stairs, was out of breath, went to the doctor. Doctor says, you have terminal lung cancer, you'll be dead in a year. Goes to 2 other doctors, same prognosis, terminal lung cancer, you'll be dead in a year. So he was depressed, and after being depressed for about a month, he decided, you know what, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go back home, I'm going to die in Icaria, where the burial costs will be a fraction of what they are in America. My wife and kids will have more to inherit. So those of you who have college kids who move back in with you, imagine your 66-year-old son and wife come back and move in with you, which is exactly what they did in Icaria. Fast forward to 2005, my father met Stamaitis, who was going strong at 100 years old and was running his own vineyard, which produced 200 liters of wine a year, most of which he drank. And Dan goes, what's your secret? What's your secret? And we were pretty sure it wasn't Stamaitis' ability to match plaid outfits. And he goes, I don't know, I guess I just forgot to die. And it sounds flippant. It sounds flippant, but he nailed it. He nailed it. That was it. He forgot to die. He didn't pursue it. It ensued. And so here's the wrap up on the Power 9. If you want to have a life where you forget to die, consider the Power 9 from the Blue Zones. Number 1, move naturally. These people lived in deconvenienced homes. Their hobbies involved moving naturally. It wasn't about going to the gym and going hard for 60 minutes and then sitting in front of a Zoom and Netflix combo for the rest of your day. Here in America in 1970, the average kid, or 70% of kids, walked to school. Average 3 miles of free physical activity every single day. Raise your hand if your kids walk to school today, or your grandkids, as the case may be. I got 2 hands. I got 3 hands, 4 hands, 5 hands. Okay. A fraction. In 1970, over 70% of kids, and it's safer today, believe it or not, despite what you might think of automobile congestion, it's safer today for kids to walk to school, and yet somehow we engineered out of their daily life 3 miles of free physical activity every single day. It's a big thing we do at Blue Zones, is safe routes to schools. And yet childhood obesity and childhood diabetes has exploded in the same period of time. So move naturally. Right outlook. These people worry about money, they worry about their kids, but they have ways to articulate their purpose, and they have ways to downshift, whether it be naps, walks, happy hour, ancestor veneration, which is what the Okinawans do. Eat wisely, very different relationship with food than we have here in America. Wine at 5, so that's 1 or 2 glasses of wine, always with friends, always over a healthy meal. And no, Scottsdale, you cannot save up and have 14 glasses on Friday night. It does not work that way. Plant slant, a lot of beans, a lot of nuts, a lot of citrus is consumed, plant slant. And then the 80% rule. Here's a fun fact. Here's a couple of the strategies we learned from Okinawa on how you can set this up in your homes. So what the Okinawans do is they pre-plate their dishes in the kitchen before bringing it out to the dining room. And what that does is it removes the invisible environmental nudge of your seconds being right there. So while you're carrying on in conversation in America, you're going to go like this and not even know it. But what they do is they pre-plate their food in the kitchen, then put it away for lunch tomorrow, so that gives them just kind of an unconscious nudge. The other thing that they have smaller plates than we do here in America. This is an expensive move, but I recommend it. I did it in my household. They have smaller plates than we do in America. Your grandparents' average plate size in America was 10 inches, 10-inch diameter. Today, the average plate size in your cupboard is 12 inches. Sounds like 2 little inches, right? No biggie. But if you do the arithmetic, that extra 2 inches translates into 71% more surface area. So Grandma and Grandpa are in the clean plate club, just like we are, but we're eating 71% more than they were. And then finally, the bedrock of the Power 9 is connection. And we talked a little bit about isolation and loneliness. Statistically speaking, loneliness is as dangerous as a smoking habit. That's the Framingham Institute out in Boston that tells us that. Loved ones first, belong, right tribe. That Framingham Institute also tells us that your friends have a 156% contagion factor on your habits. In other words, if your 3 best friends' idea of a good time is going to the Patron Loco down on Main Street and eating nachos and watching baseball, that has a 156% chance of becoming your habits. The same is true if their idea of a good time is volunteering or going for a bike ride or a hike, as I'm sure most of your friends' idea of a good time is. At Blue Zones, we have strategies to not dump your unhealthy friends, but maybe augment with people who want to be on a similar journey. All right, so let's say Todd and Mayor Ortega come back on stage, we do a big bear hug, and we announce that we've got a Blue Zone super pill that we're going to give everybody. Everybody's going to be healthier. And it worked. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. Because the truth is, Americans wouldn't take it long enough to have any effect. And that's why things like diabetes, cancer, heart disease, things that we know are only curbed by preventative measures, just continue to grow and just continue to grow astronomically. What we've done in a preventative sense is gym memberships, supplements, and diets, and they don't work. And the reason that they don't work and a Blue Zone super pill wouldn't work is because it relies on individual discipline. And discipline is a muscle, and muscles fatigue. So unless you're Tom Brady and you have a private vegan chef, or you're one of the 1% of Americans that has the life and the income to do Ironman competition, for most of us, life gets in the way. And that's why these things don't work. They're well-intentioned, but something called the Hawthorne effect happens. When the cameras are rolling, everyone's real good about the follow-through. But when the cameras go away, follow-through drops off. It's like New Year's Day, January 1st. What happens to gym memberships on January 1st? They go up. And without fail, after 6-9 months, there's 100% attrition. So if what America's been doing to curb these endemics isn't working, what does work? Well, once again, with a grant from National Institutes of Health, we studied a community around the world that started out unhealthy and turned it around. We found North Karelia, Finland. North Karelia, Finland had the highest rates of cardiovascular disease anywhere on the planet. In the 80s, men and women at the age of 40 and 50 were dropping dead like flies. And in a peer-reviewed study, they came in with a model that Blue Zones has, I think, largely evolved. I won't say perfected because there's no end state in community work and in health and in innovation, but has largely evolved. In a peer-reviewed study, what they originally did in the 80s, they've held for 40 years. So they dropped cardiovascular disease by 80% and held it there for 40 years. What did they do? They realized discipline is a muscle. They realized that life gets in the way. They realized you have to take the onus. And by the way, everybody, this is our model. This is what we do. This is our intervention. It's called Life Radius. Take the onus off the individual and put it on their surroundings. Put it on their choice architecture, the choices that are all around them. And if you can improve the nudges, the invisible nudges that are all around us, you're going to change behaviors at scale much more assuredly than you try to motivate the masses with a fancy speech. So most of us in this room will spend 90% of our moments on this earth in a 10-mile radius of our home. We call that the life radius. If we can optimize that life radius, we're going to be able to have an outsized impact and a measurable impact. So from an individual standpoint, Blue Zones comes in and starts to curate social networks, just like mimicking what happens in the blue zones. Moais, purpose workshops, cooking demonstrations. Everybody has an opportunity to take a pledge, use some of our digital tools. Then we work with businesses, schools, restaurants, grocery stores, major employers, faith-based communities, to help give them our best practice playbook for their type of industry on how they can make the healthy choice, the easy choice, not just for their patrons, but for their employees as well, and then show them how it's actually profitable, how they actually make more money by aligning to well-being. And then finally, policy, that big invisible nudge. I'm really glad to hear that we have a number of council members, the city manager, the mayor, people who are already frontline workers in the community and the government, because this is the big P, this is the big lever, is working with the strategy, the general plan that you guys already have in place to make sure that it's done, not just with a prism of well-being, but a operationalized design so that we can actually attack food system, tobacco, and built environment. So those invisible nudges that are all around us. And that's how you do it. That's life radius. When you get critical mass, if anybody's ever read Malcolm Gladwell, when you get critical mass in people, places, and policy, the choice architecture changed, the healthy choice is the easy choice, and then people start to change their behaviors because we're making more options available to them. When given the option, people end up picking the healthy choice. Does it work in America? This is all fancy. Does it work in America? 12 years ago, we combed the United States. We found our pilot in Albert Lea, Minnesota. Over 100 communities responded to an RFP to be the first. Albert Lea won this. We brought our people, places, and policy model. We told them, look, we'll turnkey for you, but you have to fill in the blanks because we're outsiders, and we're always going to be outsiders. This has to be work that is led by the community, informed by the community. And in order to get that intel and to make it customized, we have a Blue Zones process, and you guys are a part of that process right now. It's indeed part of the process. It's happening all this week with the 300 community members participating in focus groups, meeting with our experts to understand what's working, what's not working, where can we accelerate work, make sure we're not duplicating the good work that's happening, activate partners, both sponsors as well as political leaders that have to be the face of this. And then it culminates in a 4-year journey where Blue Zones will hire, in concert with the community, hire people from Scottsdale. Give them a full-time job. Give them office space. Give them Blue Zone IP brand marks, training, and national expert and national executive support. And for 4 years, those people are hitting the pavement, going to the restaurants, the schools, the grocery stores, community events, working with the policymakers to make sure we get that critical mass in people, places, and policy. So after 5 years, Blue Zones exits left, and this becomes a community-owned and operated asset. But the point is you've got enough permanent and semi-permanent changes that we're able to make results. Results like this one, which Walter Willett from Harvard University School of Public Health wrote up in Time on the Albert Lea pilot back 12 years ago. That project's still going to this day. Our second demonstration was not far from here in the beach cities of California, 100,000 Americans, a melting pot of Americans, black, brown, Caucasian. The current Surgeon General of the United States, Vivek Murthy, came down and took inventory of that, and he gave us a pretty compelling endorsement for the transformation that we were able to do in 4 years in concert with the local health district there. From there, we went back to the Midwest, to Iowa, the pork state, in partnership with the governor of Iowa and Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we did 11 different cities. Blue Zone project.
Lynn Stansberry. I have lived in Cedar Rapids all my life. I was born here. And I live in the house that I grew up in. In 2008, we were flooded and we rebuilt our house. At that time, I weighed 278 pounds. Cedar Rapids was going to start the Blue Zones project. And I was diagnosed with sleep apnea and restless leg syndrome, fibromyalgia, diabetes, and a doctor at Mayo had told me that I was obese. So I decided that the Blue Zone project was a wonderful thing for me to do because it was getting our city healthy. Thought about it and decided that I wanted to see my grandchildren grow up, graduate, get married, have children. I started going through my cupboards and realizing how many things that we ate that were not healthy. I don't use margarine anymore. I don't eat whole bread. We eat more fruit than probably the average family. I was lucky if I could walk down the block without being tired. Now I can walk a couple of miles. So I have now lost 105 pounds. My husband and I walk, and we ride our bikes, and we do the meet me at the market in our city. And so it's made us closer. Cody, my grandson, gave me a hug one day, said, "Grandma, this is the first time I have ever gotten my arms all the way around you." And it just brought tears to my eyes, and I still, when I think about it, it still brings tears to my eyes. My name is Lynn Stansberry. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and because of the Blue Zones Project, I'm going to live a longer, happier life.
Believe it or not, we didn't have to pay for that. That was not a Blue Zone paid. They sent that to us. One of her kids did that for a school project. What a great testimonial. And then from Iowa, Fort Worth, Texas, still one of the biggest Blue Zone demonstrations to date. 750,000 Americans, leadership through the health system, the mayor, and the major employers. And this is the second video I'll show you guys today.
All right. When we rode into Fort Worth 3 years ago, Mayor Betsy Price was on a mission to rescue her beef-obsessed, obesity-plagued city.
You guys are on life support here. It's not so good.
We're really way down there.
Back then, they were one of America's least healthy cities, with soaring healthcare costs, stressed-out commuters, and overweight school kids. But the health-conscious mayor found inspiration thousands of miles away, in remote places where people live longer and healthier than anywhere else on Earth. National Geographic fellow Dan Buettner discovered the Blue Zones a decade ago. He took us to one of them, Sardinia, a couple of years ago.
The longest lived men on the planet live right around here.
People here are always on the move, often up hills, eat a mostly plant-based diet, and wash it down with a glass of wine. Family ties are important too, common threads throughout most Blue Zones.
What you've learned is there's no silver bullet.
It's 20 or 30 little things, but they're little things that you can transport from places like Sardinia and bring them home and have them work for you.
Back in Fort Worth, the mayor asked Buettner to help her do just that, convincing big steakhouses to put healthier choices on the menu.
Portobello mushroom is completely different.
Acorn squash?
Having police hand out fresh vegetables and fruit instead of tickets, and encouraging everyone, even Sunday morning churchgoers, to exercise.
I don't even recognize that girl anymore.
Latasha Dandy says the Blue Zones project inspired her to shed 70 pounds.
My goal was to start changing little things to feel better, and then it was like I woke up and the weight was gone.
She's not alone. Fort Worth's child obesity rates have dropped 6%. In fact, a Gallup poll of America's healthiest cities says Cowtown is changing its tune.
We've jumped from 62 to 47. We've jumped up 15 slots in 4 years. That's a long way.
They say everything's bigger in Texas. Well, it's the little things imported from places like Sardinia that are making Fort Worth healthier. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, Fort Worth, Texas.
So the Texas project, which, by the way, we just renewed our relationship, our partnership there for an additional 3 years. That's 8 years in running. That last fall won an award from American Hospital Association for resiliency and well-being. Basically, American cities experienced a slide in well-being during the pandemic. They didn't go up, but they held firm. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, so every mayor in a city larger than 50,000 people, did a resolution supporting Blue Zones. I know I'm bragging. I'm proud of our team and the community and the partners that we get to work with every day. Results. So what are outcomes? The point of this slide, you got a small, medium, large community and an employer example on screen. The point of this slide is this. This is not just population health. It's not just public health. This is well-being. And as you'll see over the next few days, and I'm going to put up my contact information for anybody here that wants to talk, what you'll see is that the science of well-being it's remarkable. It's remarkable. When you improve well-being so far upstream, the downstream effects are more than pop health. Their economic development, their purpose, their productivity, their workforce attraction, development, and retention, and their equity, their health equity. So, no, we're not a panacea. We're not going to solve institutional racism or homelessness. But this well-being piece goes way beyond just reducing disease, which has a huge cost in our American communities. And that's for both individuals, communities, and employers, organizations. And I'm going to wrap up, so only bear with me for 4 more minutes, please. So where are we today? I showed you the first 3. We're in 61 American cities. That's all the yellow dots on the map. 4.5 million Americans live in a Blue Zone Project community. All the orange dots are communities like Scottsdale that are looking to pressure test like we're doing this week or launch a project post-pandemic. Every single one is different. Every single community is very different. Scottsdale obviously is no Albert Lee, and it's no Beach Cities, and it's no Fort Worth. Blue dots are one not-for-profit health system that believed that this is the way healthcare is going outside of the brick-and-mortar structure, put $500 million of community benefit towards putting a project in every one of its 23 anchor markets. Timing, you guys all know the timing. Mental health, workforce challenges, especially in healthcare, the silver tsunami, I mean, these things are all no better manifested than right here in Scottsdale, strongly accelerating the work that we're doing across America. The Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, same guy I showed you earlier, he articulated very clearly that private sector has skin in this game. As you guys know, especially you that might be employers know, that we have rising costs of healthcare for employers and lower productivity for employees. 6 out of 10 American workers shows up to the job site with at least 1 chronic disease. 6 out of 10. 4 out of 10 show up with 2 or more chronic diseases. That's white-collar, blue-collar, no-collar jobs. So we're losing our competitive edge with our peer nations because of the rising costs to do business and the lower productivity. Here's a fun one. Amelia knows I watch a lot of documentaries. World War II, you think about D-Day, you think about defeating the Nazis, you think about Pearl Harbor. Here's a story about productivity. If anybody ever thinks productivity is squishy. Americans in 36 months built 300,000 airplanes, 2 million trucks, and 5,000 ships in 36 months. Anybody here project manager? Because that sounds like it would never happen these days. So productivity, big piece here. And all this, even though we spend 7x more than our peer nations on healthcare, we spend almost 20% of our GDP on healthcare. 20%, $4 trillion for the first time. Now, I'm a big believer that that money is money that could be spent on roads and bridges and education and military and science, but instead it's spent on healthcare, and we get worse results than our peer nations. I also believe that at the end of the day, every cent of that $4 trillion is paid for by 2 groups of Americans. American workers, in terms of lower wages or lower employment, and American households, in terms of either higher taxes or generational debt, passing the buck on to our kids. So when we think about the value of well-being and reducing medical costs, it doesn't just go to an Honor Health, it doesn't just go to an insurance company. I really see that as going right to American families and households, which, by the way, the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy in America is medical bills. So when we started this work, and over the last 10 years, and this is my second to last slide, so thank you, we studied what doesn't work when you try to do this work, and we found it doesn't work when it's outsiders coming in. It only works when the outsiders have something to offer, like a big vision, like a catalyzing and mobilizing and activating story and science, when we have a design that's measurable, that you can baseline and then benchmark the efficacy of your intervention against a balanced scorecard of community outcomes. It has to be resourced. How are you going to mobilize resourcing? And no, we're not talking about taxpayer dollars. We've never taken taxpayer dollars to do a Blue Zone private. This has private sector value prop behind it. And then accountability is a big one. And if we move forward together, you'll see that Blue Zones puts our money where our mouth is in terms of guarantees and at-risk I asked my father, I said, that's all good. I really understand now after doing this work for years with communities across the country, but how do you activate individuals? I spend so much time telling people discipline is a muscle, muscles fatigue. How do we activate individuals? And he said, all of us need 4 things. Someone to love, something to do, some way to give back, and something to look forward to. And that's what we do. That's what we're trying to do. That's what you guys are already trying to do in your lives for your kids and for your stakeholders. And when you give them these 4 things, they'll go out and get the outcomes for you. People who have high well-being, I'm telling you right now, they wake up and they create. And then they find other people to co-create together, create schools and bridges and problem solve. And no more is this best, and this is my close, by the way, no more is this best displayed than our buddy Stamaitis Mortiartis. You guys remember Stamaitis? Icarian guy who forgot to die, mixed his plaids, drinks a lot of wine. I mean, here's a perfect example of what happens when you give these 4 things. We actually got some grief back here in America because people were like, wait a second, lung cancer is lung cancer. You can't just whisk away lung cancer because of where you live. So we actually called Stamaitis and caught up with him a little bit. He was late for a social event with some friends. And we asked him one last question, Stamaitis. Did you ever ask yourself what happened to that lung cancer diagnosis? He said, well, you know, I did. And he actually had traveled back in the late 90s to go meet with his doctors to find out what the status of that lung cancer diagnosis was. And we said, well, what did they say? And he said, nothing. They were already dead. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to invite Michelle up, as well as my colleagues Lynn and Amelia, and we're going to take questions. Amelia and Lynn are operating partners. Lynn comes to us from the Congress of New Urbanism as our senior policy expert, and Amelia is the one that's operationalized all our work across communities over the last 12 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Great, thank you so much, Dan. And can I just say, it's so great to see all of you here. Thank you so much for joining us here in Scottsdale. As Todd said, it's almost like a party as we come with Honor Health, the city, and Blue Zones to welcome you. So this is the part where we want to hear back from you. We want your questions. Pull out your phone. Those of you that know me know that I have both of them going right now, so wish me luck. QR code. I believe you had a piece of paper that had the QR code. If you don't know what a QR code is, I did not know what it was until the pandemic, and I went to a restaurant, and my 16-year-old son had to show me how to pull it up. So no embarrassment. Ask your neighbor. Pull up that QR code. Text us your questions live. Phil Donahue moment. Tell us what you're thinking. Tell us what your thoughts are after hearing from Dan about the great work that Blue Zones potentially can bring to Scottsdale. And we're going to do some rapid fire, some in-depth questions for the next about 10, 15 minutes. So warming you up, all right? Warming you up here. What have you been seeing as you're coming out of the pandemic with Blue Zones communities? What has helped really thrive or survive in the last 2 years?
All right, I'll take that. Nice to see everyone today. Thanks for having us. I'm Amelia Klabitz. I'm the VP of Finance and Operations at Blue Zones. I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing coming out of the pandemic, but I'll invite Lynn and Danny to answer as well. So we've seen really strong resiliency in our communities. We've seen more people engaged and invited, excited to be there and join us. And like every organization during the pandemic, we needed to really pivot, and very quickly. Our work, as you've seen, is really grassroots. It's really on the ground, and it's in person. It's community organizing. It's bringing people together. And when we were faced with the challenge of not being able to do that in person, we really dug in and figured out how to do that virtually. Create those connections, meet with people, get organized, and find different ways of doing it. We've held many kickoffs, which is new communities joining the Blue Zones movement and kicking off in their community, doing things like having outdoor drive-in movie events to share the message, get connected with people in a safe setting, and bring this work into their community. We've seen people come together and raise many millions of dollars to fight food insecurity in their communities and bring new programs and projects to fruition. Danny? Or Lynn?
I got
Yeah,
something. So, hi everyone. I'm Lynn Richards. I'm the Senior VP for Policy and Implementation. So my expertise is in the built environment, though with Blue Zones I work across all of our policy sectors. So in the pandemic, well, I'm just going to ask you all, how many people over the last 2 years started just walking more because, dear God, you needed to get outside? Right? I mean, and this is what has happened not only across the United States, but across the world. So what we saw was this global movement to shut down streets to open it up for people. So when we talk about it within a Blue Zones context, everyone is coming to us in the cities in which we're working to say, how can we re-engineer, how can we change our built environment to prioritize pedestrians? Because we discovered walking and we want to keep doing it. So when we think about how have Blue Zones communities changed because of the pandemic, we're hearing a siren call to prioritize pedestrians. We're hearing a siren call to create places that make the healthy choice the easy choice. So I'm new to Blue Zones. I've only been here for 6 months, and just in that 6 months, I have seen this real momentum for let's change where and how we live to prioritize our health.
Great, thanks so much. I think, Danny, you talked a little bit about this as a multi-day site visit, and I know many of you will see you throughout the week, so we're excited to hear more about. Can you talk a little bit about what a site visit encompasses and what you'll be doing this week in Scottsdale?
That's great. I'll talk a little bit about that. So this week, we're really digging in for the on-the-ground assessment work, really understanding what's happening, what the strengths, challenges, and opportunities are in Scottsdale, and how that might work well with our model and approach. So a little bit of what you've seen today. We are going to take that model and approach and really understand how we can work together effectively in a transformation for Scottsdale. And over the next few days, that's going to entail some more information from Blue Zones, really sharing what is underpinning that work that you've seen, those successes. How do we do this? What's it all about? How long does it take? What does that entail? And then how do you know that it's working? How are we accountable to the outcomes that you see? So we'll share a little bit about that tomorrow. And then we're going to listen. We're going to listen to what's taking place right now from you all, what's happening in your schools, your restaurants, your grocery stores. What are your workplaces doing? What kind of opportunities do people have today? And then how are you experiencing your environment? What's the food system looking like? How does tobacco and alcohol affect your environment?
And then overlaying all of that, which is, well, how do you want your city and your communities and your neighborhoods to work? You know, do you want to have more opportunities to move naturally? Do you want to have more opportunities for community gardens? Do you want to have more opportunities to connect? So in addition, I think that we always start with a conversation of how do you want to live? Where do you want to live? Where and how do you want to live, work, play, shop, and pray?
Great, appreciate that. All right, we're starting to get the questions coming in. Thank you all for not making me have to ad-lib ad nauseum. So a couple of questions from the audience. What entity is in the lead to implement this plan?
The entity to lead to implement this plan. So that's a great question. Danny talked a little bit about how we hire a team in a community. So this work is in partnership. It's in collaboration with you all in the community. But Blue Zones brings the expertise in the model. So in many communities we work in, we have multiple sponsoring organizations who are leading from within the community. And Blue Zones hires a team, trains that team, their community members who've been doing similar or like type work in communities already. And we bring that expertise and that model together to help drive this kind of well-being change. You have anything to add to that?
So Danny and I were talking about this last night, in that this absolutely is a community-driven effort. And a lot of you are probably thinking, oh dear God, another thing to do, right? Because we're all living really busy lives. But I think a large part of what Blue Zones does is that it creates the environment. It does a lot of the work, so it is really easy for the community to lead a lot of these conversations. So you're not doing the organizing. You're not like pulling all of this together. That's where the staff really comes in. It creates a platform for you all to engage, and that's where the collaboration is. And then the other piece that I want to mention is that when we get to the point where this becomes a community-led partnership, you will have access over the entire years of your program to pull in national experts. You want to increase your access to community trails? Let's bring in, the top-ranked community expert on trails management. You want to really extend how you bike. You want to increase your food bank distribution. All of that, that's the real power of Blue Zones, is that we have access to some of the best-in-class experts that you can kind of come in and pull from their expertise, but you, at the end of the day, are expert in your community.
Great. And I think in our conversations, you talked about in the communities you worked in, there's usually an anchoring institution that invites Blue Zone into the community. I know Honor Health has been very pleased and privileged to welcome you to Scottsdale. And so from there, you use that anchor, and generally it is a hospital, health system, insurance company that has an interest in the health of the community, and then bringing those other partners along. So it's really a partnership amongst anchoring institutions as well as like-minded private employers, public entities to lean in and figure out how to move it to the next step. Great. Can you talk a little bit about equity? I know health equity is growing importance in our society as we're coming out of this pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about how Blue Zones addresses health equity?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that, and Lynn, you can add as well. So our work is really to lift and improve for everyone. It's everyone, everywhere in a community. And we do that work not only in concert with best practices and guidance from experts working across the field, but really working with community members. Blue Zones hires people that reflect the community that we're working in. So not only people with expertise in their own community, but have a clear understanding and cultural competency within their own community as well.
Another way that we address that is to look spatially or geographically within the city to identify those areas, those neighborhoods where we can have the greatest impact. So I spent a lot of the day yesterday with Michelle and other folks from Honor Health learning about the 3 Scottsdales, right? I hope I'm not branching out and like 3 Scottsdales, it's just one city. But when you think about health equity, what does or what can we do for North Scottsdale? But what kind of programs and support and changes and approaches can be deployed, again, in concert with the community and collaboration in South Scottsdale? And I think when you start looking geographically and spatially throughout an entire city or region, you begin to identify those areas that are most in need of intervention. And that's another way we address it.
Great. We got a question from Scottsdale Unified School District. Scott Sampson, thanks so much for being here today. Will we get tools for schools to become a part of this effort, and how are youth populations engaged?
Yes, that is a great question. And we believe that schools is one of the major levers within our program. So our approach definitely includes schools, and it includes schools on many levels. It includes schools in the concept of we have interventions and programs and environmental changes that affect children. Our interventions and programs affect teachers, faculty, and staff working with those children. And then we also work to change the environment through policy, programs, and on-the-ground changes to support healthy options, walking to school safely, biking to school, other options to engage with your environment, not only while you're walking to and from school or you're in school, but outside of it. And what we found is through our Blue Zones Schools Pledge that schools adopt and take, you can choose your own way of implementing this program to be effective and then to really transform lives. And it's not just the children that get the effect. The pickup is really those children bring all of those healthy behaviors and education home. I personally have a 5-year-old, and whatever happens at school ends up in my home. And whatever new foods she gets to try also end up in my home, which is a really meaningful opportunity to change well-being not only for that child or that teacher, but for that family.
Yeah, I got nothing on that. That's awesome.
We look forward. I know we have a school focus group tomorrow, and many of our school districts and schools will be participating, so we'll learn a little bit more about that school pledge and how we bring it to Scottsdale. I guess, as we kind of wrap up here, what makes Scottsdale a good Blue Zone candidate city?
I'll take that. Well, I tell you right now, none of us have any idea what a Blue Zone Scottsdale will look like. We know it won't look like Fort Worth, Albert Lee, Iowa, and that's the fun part, because we would be co-creating what this needs to reflect the post-pandemic narrative that this community is already working towards. But what we do know is that we can bring some ancient wisdom from the world's longest lived people. We can bring some modern science on well-being, and that will be a big piece of Thursday's conversation, is how do you underwrite the ROI, the economics that flow from well-being. But what we can't bring is alignment amongst the community to want to work in concert for a common cause like well-being. We can't bring a willingness to look at and take inventory of all the things that are priorities and seeing how they can coalesce in an elegant fashion around a well-being project. And the third is not just enough to make the healthy choice the easy choice. There's a little courage, a little resolve from both the political leaders, the lawmakers, and the private sector leaders, and the employers, and the people who are on the front lines to make those healthy choices the unavoidable choices. And that's where you really see the magic of this life radius approach. And so far we've seen that. So far we've seen that through Honor Health, through leadership that we've met with at the city, and we're just as excited about this formal pressure test as you are.
I might add to that, if I can, Danny, since I spent yesterday really learning about your community. I think you all need to take a step back and pat yourselves on the back of how many assets and how far you've come on this journey. You know, we were really impressed yesterday on all of the access to nature that you have, your incredible bike infrastructure. So you have a number of assets already at your disposal, but what we are able to kind of shine a light on is how the community can maximize these assets, like wayfinding on the Beltline, putting, bike racks in more places. What are the very specific nudges that might work best for your community to really maximize the incredible assets that you have?
Great, thanks, Lynn. And I can tell you, Lynn was totally geeking out. We had to pull her out of the streets as she was taking pictures, looking at all of our streetscapes and our bike lanes. So she was in it to win it. Really, again, appreciate everyone's questions. It did take some courage for us to serve you hummus and vegetables and chia seeds this morning. I did get a request for how they can find the recipes, and I believe, Dan, you said they are on bluezones.com. Many of those recipes you can find. So a wealth of knowledge there, and we would be happy to share our breakfast recipes with you if you're interested. Also getting asked if this presentation is recorded. Yes, we're actually streaming live right now on the city's YouTube channel. It'll also be available for watching after the fact. We can send out that link. And with that, I'm gonna ask Danny to take us home and close us out and talk about the next steps.
Yes. Can you bring back the QR code? Nobody gets to leave until they have filled out the survey. Please, 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 like I said, today is about hearing your voice, and basically the rest of the week is hearing about the community's voice. But if you could, and we'll probably send a follow-up email if you don't have the chops for QR code quite yet. But we want to hear from you, want to hear what you thought, want to hear if you think that a Scottsdale Blue Zone project is feasible and valuable, and then there's opportunities for volunteerism. So if you are interested in getting in the game, informing the blueprint, and volunteering on one of our committees or subcommittees for this work, that QR code will take you there. From here, we're going to be listening this afternoon on a community-led presentation. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the value in ROI. We have a 35 CEO roundtable on Friday with major employers to understand this work. And then Blue Zones will be coming back in 45 to 60 days with a full report, and it's open to the public, both in print and PowerPoint, on our findings. It's a SWOT analysis. What's working, what's not working, where can we accelerate the work that you guys are already doing? And then with that, there'll be a couple options for how we can move forward with a full Blue Zone project here in Scottsdale. With that, we shockingly are right on time. Thank you, everybody.